promising. Okay, so I guess we've talked about the file systems. The next thing to look at is how to actually get data onto the file system if we have some. So we're going to be talking about data mover nodes and not using the login node to move data onto the system. We'll discuss some strategies around different approaches we can take for staging data, and we'll have a look at using secure shell to move data onto and off of the Scratch file system from our laptops. So you might remember from Christian's talking about earlier, there were these data movers off to the side. So on the left there, we have the login nodes. That's where we end up when we log into the system. We're not on the compute nodes, we're just on the login nodes. But those login nodes are supporting lots and lots of people. So if I just come back to my shell, hopefully I'm on a node where there's a few people. But if I've just typed the users command, you can see we've got like dozens of people. Oh, sorry, I lost it. There we go. I've typed the command users, and you can see there's dozens of people that are currently using just this login node. So it's just one computer. You've got lots of people using it, so we don't want to be running lots and lots of computationally intensive jobs here, and we also don't want to be running very large sort of terabyte file transfers through this node either, because it's going to interfere with everyone's connectivity for doing the work on the node. So for that reason, we have these data mover nodes, which are very similar to login nodes. They have slightly better network connections to the external network for facilitating that movement of data onto and off of the supercomputer. So these data mover nodes are connected to all of the file systems I was talking about. And so you can just move them onto those nodes, onto the file systems, and those file systems will be viewable by all of the nodes on the supercomputer. So in terms of staging data onto the system, there's a couple of paths you can take. You could stage the data first onto Acacia from the world, and then from Acacia stage it onto through the data mover nodes onto the Scratch file system on Sotonix. Or you could, I guess, shortcut that. Don't worry about Acacia to start with, and just stage your data directly onto Sotonix. And so your choice there will likely be whether or not you're going to need to, I guess, use that data for longer than 21 days. So if it's data that you're going to need to use repetitively throughout your projects, it's probably good just to put it up on Acacia in the first place and get used to staging it off of Sotonix onto the Scratch file system. But if it's your input data for your first simulation, and then you're not actually going to want to keep it around for longer, you're happy that you've got a copy off-site, then maybe you just want to get it straight onto Scratch. You don't want to worry about Acacia to start with, and maybe you'll produce some results later that you'll put on Acacia, for example. So in this module here, we'll be talking about how to do that direct. So from the world directly through the data nodes onto Scratch on Sotonix. And then I guess archiving is just the opposite process. So you've got your results on Scratch. Are you going to use them again? Do you want to have them around for longer than 21 days on the system? In that case, you want to stage them back to Acacia. If you're more or less done and you just want to get your work off the system and onto your local laptop or your institution, that's when you'll use the approach we're talking about right now to pull that data directly back to system. So as I said, please don't use the login nodes, please use the data mover nodes, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment. There are firewalls as part of good cybersecurity. You shouldn't have any trouble moving data using the secure shell protocols with firewalls from the Pawsey firewall end. You will occasionally hit issues with, depending on where you are, maybe your institutional firewalls. And so sometimes you might even try to SSH into Sotonix and you can't. And so it might be that your local institution is blocking outgoing SSH connections. This can also be an issue if you are using licensed software that needs to connect to a license server that's sitting in an institution. Sometimes you'll need to go talk to your local university IT to open up some firewalls to allow Cytonic software that's running on Cytonics to then connect back through to a license server that's sitting in your institution. So if you do sort of hit these problems where it seems like Cytonics is not there, then definitely feel free to open up a help desk ticket. Sometimes there's nothing we can do. We can provide you with advice to then go follow up with your institutional IT support, but at least we'll be able to provide you some information on it. Let's have a look at actually moving some data back and forth using a program called SCP. There are also lots of other clients that you can use that have a graphical interface, so you can sort of drag and drop files. There's some examples there. One thing to be aware of is sometimes these programs have an auto retry. And so if you type your password into it, it'll just auto retry with the wrong password repeatedly and immediately lock you out. So make sure if they do have those options, don't have them turned on. And finally, with these kind of transfers, often there's sort of an overhead per file. So if you have hundreds or thousands of files, it can actually take longer because there are so many of them. And so sometimes it's worth tarring them up or zipping them up first and sending it as one big file. And it's actually, you get better throughput that way. So let's have a look, I guess. Might switch back to the prompt here. So I'm currently logged into Cytonics, and the first thing I'm going to do here is actually log out of Cytonics. So I'm just going to press Control D. And so now I'm back on a terminal on my local system. And if I have a look, I don't have much in my local directory. So I'm just going to cat test and redirect that to a file.txt. Oh, sorry, echo. Or caffeine. All right, so what did I just do? So we now see there's a file.txt. And now if I cat that file, just look at the contents. You can see I've got a file.txt that says test. So just a simple example. And now we want to move this onto Cytonics. So we're going to use the SCP command, SCP. And again, this is from the local system, not on Cytonics. I'm sending it to Cytonics. And I'm wanting to send file.txt. And we're going to send it to my username and now this is where if you're SSHing in, you would type cytonics.pawsey.org.au, right? Now that would use the login nodes. So here we want to use the data mover nodes. So instead of typing cytonics.pawsey.org.au, we're going to type data mover with a dash .pawsey.org.au. So that's telling it where to send it. Now we need to say where on that system we want to put it. So I'm going to put a colon and then provide a path. And I'm wanting to put this in my Scratch directory. So I'm going to put it in Scratch, my project ID, and then my file, my username. Then I'm with the same name. Yeah. So if I let that go, this is the first time I've copied to that data mover node, so it's just asking me to check that I'm happy that it is who I think it is. If you see these after you've been using a system for a long time, it means that either one of the sysadmins has wiped the SSH config on the system you're connecting to, and it's now got a new key, or someone's trying to grab your connection. I'm going to type my password. Oops. If you mistype, I just quit out to avoid getting locked with a Control-C. And you can see there that file's been 100% transferred. If you've got lots of files, you'll see it sort of goes through and takes a little longer. So that's great. We've transferred it. Let's log in and see if we can see it. So I'm going to SSH my username, Onyx, Pawsey.eu. Now we're in. Now we're on the system. I can use that $myscratch. Go straight there. That wouldn't have worked on my local system because that environment doesn't know anything about Scratch. So hopefully if I do an ls, we can see amongst all my other directories there, where I'm working on things, we can see a file.txt. And if we cat that file.txt, we can see it's got test in it. So I know it's a simple example, but it scales, right? You can do that for lots of files. You can use a star to grab everything in the directory. If you've tarred or zipped something up, you can have a big zip file that you can use to move it directly up onto the file system. So I'm going to copy that file, file2, txt. Then I'm going to edit that. In fact, why don't I just echo S2 to that file. That'll override it with test2. Have a look at the contents of that. So now I'm going to log out. So I'm now back on my local system. And now we're going to do the opposite of what we just did. We're going to try and pull that file2.txt back to my laptop. Yes. Oh, yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, feel free to, if you're getting behind, put up the red sticker or put your hand up and let me know, and we can slow down. I might switch it over to the slides actually, because that's got the example on it. So if you're getting a permission denied, one thing to note is that my example is using my project. So you'll need to use your one. So the courses count. If I just log back in real quick. And have a look at the groups I'm in. Yeah, so your project will be courses 01. If you're using a course account, if you're using sort of an account that has been set up for your internship, it will be the project that you've got. An easy way to find out would be to log in and type groups, like I just did, and then it will show you what groups you're in. Or if you do a CD to $MyScratch and do a PWD, it'll tell you the path. Alrighty, so let's keep going. So I think we were just looking at moving files up, and so hopefully everyone's managed to move a file up to Cytonics. So I was just looking at how to move back. So moving back is more or less exactly the same process. It's just you switch the order of the arguments. So if I log out of Cytonics, we had before this command that was copying from the local file.txt to the remote data mover node. And all I'm going to do is remove that first argument so that my remote target becomes the first argument. And just now I have to specify which file I want to move. And so I think it was file2.txt for what I was doing. And then I want to put it here. So that dot is important. You do need to have a second argument. And so I'm just telling it to put it in the current directory that I'm in. Or you could specify a path there on your local file system. So I'll go put in my password. If I do an ls, see that's pulled it back down to file2.txt. And I can cat that file2. There. So I guess that command again is just the same as the last one. It's just the two paths are different. So the first argument is where it's from. The second argument is where it's going to. And yeah, so this time I've specified that file2.txt to say which file I want to move. If I wanted to move all the files in that directory, I could do something like a star, grab it all. You can also do things like specify recursive with a -r, recursively grab everything in a particular directory. So there are some options there if you go and look at the help text for SCP. All right, so back to the slides. Were there any questions on moving files to and from Cytonics? Yes. Yes, yes. Yes. Yeah, so the question was that last command, was that moving from Cytonics to my laptop? And yes, that's the case. Yeah. Thank you. Other questions? All right, we'll keep going. So here's an exercise. Have we all had a go at moving something to and from? I think we might skip this one, but feel free to come along and do it once you have the slides. This is just tarring up, zipping up some files and moving them, but I'm pretty confident you'll be able to do that yourself. And is it coming back? So one thing that I haven't talked about, so we've done all of this. Oh yes, question.
Oh, yeah. I was just asking about the tarballing. Because you said it's like faster to like tarball them and then send them. Is there a way to do like a partial transfer of a tarball, or is the whole tarball, like if it's a really big tarball, you put a lot of files together?
Yeah, I don't think so. I know there's instead of using SCP, you can use rsync, which will store partial progress. But I think that's on a per file basis. So if you have 100 files and you get 60% through and it stops, then rsync will sort of detect how far through you are and only transfer the last 40 the second time you run it.
Right. So maybe like a strategy could be like, if you had like a lot of files and you still wanted to like tarball, maybe you just like tarball like little sections. Or
yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Good question. We've done all of that file transfer from our laptop. Like we've logged out of Sotonix, we've been pushing and pulling things from our laptop. And the reason for that is that it's Sotonix has been set up with a host name, so it's easy to point at it. Whereas your laptop, if you're on Sotonix, how do you point across the internet to your laptop? It doesn't have its host name. It doesn't have an IP address that's easy to get to. You may find, however, that you might have an institutional system at a university or research centre where it does have a host name that's easy to transfer data to and from. And so that might be a use case where you actually want to do your data transfer from Sotonix. So if that's the case, you don't want to use those commands from the login nodes for large files because that will send it out through the login node. And instead we have a petition in the scheduler where you can actually get supercomputing jobs to run on those nodes. And so we'll be talking a lot about scheduling and how to do that in the coming modules. But just be aware that that facility exists. So you can actually do some really cool things where you might set up chains of jobs where the first job pulls your data from your institutional data system onto Sotonix, onto Scratch. And then there's another job that's dependent on that job that will actually do the processing and then check if it's okay. And then there's another job that if it's okay, will then take that data and transfer it back off to university system. So you can actually automate the workflow and the steps by linking them all together. And for those data transfer steps, you can use the copy petition on Sotonix. You can also do that to Acacia as well. So you can automate your workflow to pull something off Acacia onto Scratch and then do the processing and then another job to put it back onto Acacia. So that way you know that your files aren't going to get deleted because the whole workflow takes care of it for you. So I think that's all I had on transferring files. So I think from here, it's Christian up next. But if you have any further questions while we're switching over, feel free to speak up.